A few seconds remained before the end. The score was extremely close. On one side, Mexico. On the other, the heavy favorite. And at the center of the piste stood the final Mexican athlete, knowing that any mistake could cost his team the gold medal. There was no room to wait. There was no time to think twice. It was attack or lose. The entire crowd watched in silence as the two fencers studied each other. Every movement could hide a trap. Every step forward could create an opportunity. Every touch could completely change the outcome. Mexico needed a comeback. And its final man decided he wasn't just going to try, he was going for the win. The final had reached its most dangerous stage. For much of the competition, the two teams had remained extremely close. Neither side was able to build a comfortable lead. But when the final stage arrived, the opponent managed to take a small advantage: 2 points. It sounds like very little, but in team fencing, 2 points in the final moments can be enormous. The Mexican athlete stepped onto the piste knowing exactly what he had to do. He couldn't waste attacks. He couldn't lose the distance. And most importantly, he couldn't allow his opponent to control the pace. The first touch came. Mexico cut the deficit. The crowd reacted immediately. The favorite tried to respond. Another touch. The advantage grew again. It was a battle of nerves. The two athletes moved rapidly across the piste. One advanced, the other retreated. One threatened to attack while the other waited for the right moment to respond. The clock continued to run. The Mexican showed no fear. He had already competed in major international events and knew that feeling. He understood that when the pressure rises, technique must remain intact. Then came another attack. Touch for Mexico. The gap narrowed again. Now the contest was practically tied. The opponent sensed the danger. He began retreating further. He tried to control the distance, but the Mexican kept applying pressure. It wasn't a desperate offensive. It was constant pressure. Every movement forced the opponent to react, and the more he reacted, the less control he had over the piste. The score changed again. Tied. The arena erupted. Now any touch could decide the gold. The two athletes stood face to face. For a few seconds, neither attacked. It was as if time had stopped. The crowd knew that the next move could be the last. The Mexican slowly advanced. The opponent tried to anticipate him. The attack began, but the response came immediately. No touch. Both returned to position. The tension grew. The clock was running down. The Mexican coach shouted instructions from the sidelines, but the athlete never took his eyes off his opponent. He knew he had to wait for the right opportunity. Then it appeared. A small mistake in distance, an opening of just a few centimeters. That was all he needed. The Mexican advanced. Touch. Mexico took the lead. The crowd went completely wild, but it wasn't over yet. The favorite still had time to respond, and he did. Touch for the opponent. Tied again. Now the contest had reached its absolute peak. Neither team had an advantage. Neither athlete could afford a mistake. The next touch would be worth the gold. The Mexican took a deep breath, looked at his opponent, took one step forward, stopped, stepped back, waited. The opponent tried to force the initiative. That's exactly what the Mexican wanted. He read the movement, changed direction, and attacked. For a fraction of a second, both athletes arrived almost simultaneously. The referee had to analyze the action. The crowd waited. Silence. Then came the decision. Point for Mexico. The stadium erupted. His teammates rushed into the competition area. The Mexican raised his arm. The gold was secured. The comeback was complete. But that medal didn't belong only to the athlete who scored the final touch. It had started much earlier. It began with the first member of the team stepping onto the piste. It continued with every touch won, with every point lost, with every moment when the team had to keep believing. And it reached the final athlete who was given a difficult situation and decided to turn it into an opportunity. That's what makes team fencing so special. You're never fighting only for yourself. When you step onto the piste, you carry the work of your teammates with you. Every point you score helps the next athlete. Every mistake has to be compensated. Every advantage has to be defended. And on that day, Mexico showed exactly that. When it seemed that the favorite had control of the final, the Mexican athlete changed the pace. When the pressure increased, he remained focused. When the score was tied, he didn't back down. And when the final opportunity appeared, he attacked. It wasn't just an attack, it was the move that decided a gold medal. The Mexican crowd celebrated, the teammates embraced, and the opponent stood still for a few seconds trying to understand how an advantage that had seemed so secure had disappeared. In the end, the difference between winning and losing was just one touch, one movement, one decision, and a fraction of a second. And it was precisely in that moment that the Mexicans showed why major finals aren't won simply by the favorite. They're won by the athlete who can remain standing when the pressure reaches its limit. Mexico entered that piste looking for a medal. It left with a story of pressure, courage, precision, and a comeback that was only possible because no one decided to give up. And when the final touch confirmed the gold, one certainty remained. In fencing, the fight doesn't end until the final point is scored.